Welcome to the Sportswoman Show. I'm your host, Gabby Hoffman. From gator hunting in the swamps of Florida to fly fishing in the cold water streams of the Mountain West, join us as we explore real human stories of women, from influencers to scientists to policymakers who are spending their lives in the outdoors. Let's begin. Ashley, thank you so much for joining the Sportswoman Show. I'm so glad Sarah, our mutual friend, connected us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Share with the listeners your background, because before we went online to record this, you had told me that you actually do hunting and conservation stuff on the side. It's not your primary job. So talk about how your primary job balances that with your hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. So my parents own a commercial printing company. We do ink on paper, screen printing, embroidery, and signage. And we do a lot of work for small to mid-sized corporations, nonprofits, and then we have several Fortune 500 clients around the globe. So really, I work about 60 to 70 hours a week, work my tail off so I can afford to be able to travel the world and do what I love with hunting and conservation.
Where did you get the hunting bug from? Because I know Pennsylvania is a sportsman's paradise. You guys have some of the greatest hunting, not only on the eastern United States, but I would say in totality. But in the eastern United States, everyone thinks of Pennsylvania as the gold standard. So was it just the backdrop of Pennsylvania? Was your family hunters? How did you learn how to do this?
Sure. So my dad grew up hunting, and whenever I was little, I was about 8 years old, and he took me out to a trap field just to shoot a shotgun for the first time. And I burst into tears crying, and I said, I never want to be a hunter. I never want to be a shooter ever in my life. And then about a year later, he took me pheasant hunting, and I had a great time. So from that point, I kind of caught the hunting bug. And then I'm 28 currently. And then about 10 years ago, I said to my dad, I'm like, I think I would really like to do international hunting. And he said to me, he's like, oh, honey, you'll never be able to afford to do that. And then when someone tells me I can't do something, I put my mind to it. And I worked really, really hard to help grow our business and to be able to afford to do international hunting. And I always tell people it's not as expensive as people think if you do a lot of research, make connections over time with outfitters. And so I made a goal, and I took my first safari to Africa a couple years ago. And then I said to myself, I'm just going to change my lifestyle so I can save a lot and travel the world and do what I love.
That's what a lot of my friends who do international hunting tell me. They're like, it's not as expensive as you think it is. It might be even cheaper than domestic hunting. And I kind of scratch my head when I hear that, because for me, I'm still working on mastering domestic species. I've gotten white-tailed deer. I would like to get elk next and black bear. I'm working my way up because I started with birds, slowly graduated to deer, and then I want to work a little bit bigger with the game, and then maybe make my way to red stag or something like that in Europe or Argentina or South America in the greater scheme of things. But yes, I hear that it actually could be even more affordable. Is that true?
It's very true. So for example, I just had a friend that went on a brown bear hunt up in Alaska, coastal brown bear. And for what he spent on one brown bear, I hunted it was 18 animals in Africa and spent 10 days there. Yes.
Unbelievable.
Exact price, not including flights. Same exact price before tips. That's exactly what it came out to be.
That's crazy. And
yep.
As you progressed in your hunting journey, so you had a resistance to it initially, but what was it in your hunting career that really set you off? Do you have a particular hunt you remember?
I think I would say, I was probably about 15, 16 years old, and my dad took me on a ram hunt. And it was the first hunt that I ever had to actually contribute money towards. And it was a small amount that I actually contributed towards. But I guess I had that buy-in at that point. And my dad, I remember before we went out, he's like, whatever you do, make sure you understand your shot placement and make sure you understand the importance of taking a life. And it's not just having a trophy on your wall. It's about ensuring that either you're using the meat yourself or donating it to someone who is in need of it, and using as much of the animal as humanly possible. And that really made a lasting impact on me. And that was further deepened whenever I was in Africa for the first time. And we actually got to experience helping donate meat to a local tribe. And it actually brought tears to my eyes, because I've never seen people, because we're so blessed in the United States of America, I've never seen people desperate for food. And when you see that kind of desperation in someone's eyes, it is a total game changer. And then shortly thereafter, I went on an elephant hunt in Botswana. And the elephant that I harvested would feed 120 people for 6 months. And that is a huge impact. And just to see how impacted these people were when they received the meat, and they use everything. They use the organs, they use the bones for support for their houses because they literally live in mutt homes. It's a crazy impact that has been very, very important to me.
That's what I hear about African hunting, because on other podcasts and my reporting work, I have made the case for why hunting in Africa is not bad. And sometimes you receive a lot of hit back, and I haven't done it, but I've spoken to people who have, and they've reassured me that there are lots of rules, ethics, of course, followed. And if you don't do management, of course, it leads to destruction of these villages. These countries and villages don't see income coming in because it's really hard, except for more recently. I think Africa has started to economically develop, but hunting has kind of been one of the facilitators of that growth in terms of tourism and what have you. Ecotourism alone doesn't help, but hunting has also supplemented and maybe even exceeded that, along with other economic development measures in the continent. But similar to what we have here in the United States and North America by extension, these debates about, do you manage the big five, whether it's Africa, or do you manage these America's equivalent of big five species? Is there justification? Is there a reason to do it? What happens if you don't? And those are questions people have to have. And sometimes, some of those charismatic species, whether in Africa or here in North America, really animate people, sometimes to the point of craziness. And I don't know if you've ever received any blowback. I know there was a few examples of women. I think they've been involved in Safari Club, which we'll talk about because I know you're involved in that as well. Tess Talley is one woman I think of. I think Britt Longoria has also been a target. And there's a couple other women who've posted their harvests from Africa and just have received this crazy blowback. With that, have you ever received any blowback to posting, or maybe you don't post? I'm not sure what you do.
Yeah, I do. I actively post because I think it's important to share what's going on. And the only post I ever received blowback on as of right now was my giraffe. And I hunted that in Africa last year. And it's, as much as you try to explain to people, some people just don't want to listen. And I've come to terms with that. But I can give you 3 examples from 3 different continents about how it is pertinent to allow hunting to manage wildlife in the areas. For example, whenever I went to Botswana to hunt leopard and elephant, leopards and elephants are both classified as problem animals there. The leopards, as they get older, their teeth start to decay and they can no longer actively hunt in the wild. Therefore, they turn to domesticated animals such as calves, and then sometimes they move on to cows as well. And Botswana is actually one of the largest exporters of cattle meat to the European market because they're all grass-fed, all natural. And the problem is these leopards come in and they prey on the weak animals. So what will happen is the farmers will shoot these leopards, and sometimes they report it, sometimes they don't. They are supposed to report it. But the problem is if hunting were a little more friendly, especially on the U.S. side, then hunters can go over, harvest these animals, pay an exorbitant trophy fee. Trust me, I paid it. And then be able to import them back into the U.S. The thing is that unfortunately what some people don't understand in the U.S. is that if these animals are not thinned out, and especially the older ones taken out, they're actually detrimental. And sometimes they even turn to people too, especially children. And the last thing people want to hear about is a child that was unfortunately mauled by a lion or a leopard on the news, because it happens and it doesn't get reported because people don't want to report the actual science behind it. Same thing with the elephants. The elephants go through, they destroy small villages. As I mentioned earlier, these houses are made of mud and sticks and straw. That's it. So an elephant will go through, and because especially if there's a drought, their noses are so strong they can smell the wells underground in these small villages that these folks have created. So they'll go through and they destroy and they rip up the wells, and then the people have no choice but to leave. And that's why the mortality rate is crazy in these small villages, especially the very remote ones, because if they have no access to food and water, obviously they're not going to survive. And whenever I hunted both my leopard and elephant, they actually have government game scouts that are with you. You have to follow a list of criteria, And we walked up to several elephants that were not shootable because they were young breeding bulls. And to effectively manage the population, you do have to take the older bulls out because they'll fight the younger bulls and try and kill them, which ultimately will damage the population even more so in the long run.
Wasn't it Botswana that threatened to send a herd of elephants to Germany, if I'm not mistaken?
They did. I actually reposted that story on my Instagram, and I actually had a lot of positive feedback on it because it was, the article was very effective in explaining how wildlife management actually works. And again, these hunters will go over and they will pay a lot of money to do this. And what people don't realize is the money goes directly back to the community. The meat goes to the community. The bones, the intestines, everything in the animal goes back to the community. And all the hunter gets to do is keep the skin. And then the ivory is actually exportable from Botswana. So that's a perk of hunting them in Botswana. And they're very overpopulated there. I can tell you when I was there for 10 days. I saw well over 300 elephants. I mean,
amazing.
They're over there a ton. In New Zealand, I just came back from New Zealand a few days ago. And in New Zealand, whenever you harvest an animal, all the meat gets donated to those who cannot afford to buy meat because meat is extremely expensive in New Zealand because they're remote. It's hard to import things there sometimes. So whenever you're donating and giving back to that community, they love hunters over there. I mean, they would welcome even more if the government would allow it. And then in Argentina, where I was about a month ago, down there, they also give the meat to the locals. And the locals, many of them had told me, if it weren't for hunting, we could not survive. There's no way. The poverty is so great. We need hunters to come in to not only give us the meat from the animal, but also to contribute to the economy. Because when hunters go, not only are they spending the money on the hunt itself, and then the permitting fees go to the government, things of that nature, but they're also spending money in the cities. They're bringing their families. They're contributing to the economy.
Hunting does have huge economic value all over the world, and you made a great point about that, because if you don't have the management, it's a grim reality too. And you're speaking to a lot of us, I think, in terms of this marrying of hunting and conservation. You're involved in an organization that I hold dear to my heart, that I'm a member of too, and I've gone to several conventions of theirs. I know a lot of the people on the federal side, Safari Club International. Talk about your involvement with them. How are you involved?
Sure. So I'm involved with our Pittsburgh chapter, Safari Club International. And what my role was, I'm actually a past president of our chapter. I was a president of our chapter actually through the pandemic. I helped carry us through that. And then my current role for our chapter is I handle all of the sponsorship engagement that comes along with our banquet. So I put on our banquet for about 550 people. We raised several $100,000 throughout the evening. And what we've really been doing in the Pittsburgh chapter is gearing our event towards women, trying to get them involved. So about 10 years ago, our event was, I'm not even kidding, about 95% men. Today, as it stands, with our current registration for our event in August, it's almost 50-50 men and women.
That's incredible. Good for you.
Thank you. And it's not only getting women hunters there, but it's exposing young females to hunting as well. And it's also, we encourage a lot of men to bring their wives, because we do have some purses and jewelry and some designer things for them to keep themselves busy with. But it also helps expose the wives to the good and the hunting and conservation does. So it helps, even though they're not hunters, it helps educate them in a very subconscious way that helps kind of make the gentleman's life a little bit easier at home.
Indeed. I mean, happy wife, happy life, right? That's what they say.
Right.
I mean, especially if the wives or significant others can go hunting with their, significant others, husbands, etc. Like, it makes the experience all the more interesting. And it should. I mean, for a banquet, guys should want to have their significant others there too.
Absolutely. And we've even noticed at our banquet too, it's kind of, the women are there. Sometimes they'll spend more on the hunts than the live auction because they kind of get the approval. But I was talking to a gentleman today, and he had said he had been coming to our event for years. I finally got his wife to come last year. And he and his wife and his daughter are actually leaving for an African safari this Saturday. And he's like, if it were never for you pushing to get my wife there and educating my wife on the good of hunting and conservation, he said she never would have allowed me to go international hunting. So that was a nice thing to hear.
That's reassuring. And I'm probably one of the few people who goes to banquets and does not buy anything because I'm trying to watch my budget. I make money now. I'm not like poor or anything, but I'm just so judicious about my spending. And if I bid on one project or item or trip, I feel like I would bid on a lot of stuff. So I have to control myself right now for those kinds of projects or products and opportunities until I see something I really, really like. So I'm waiting and holding back for something that I could truly feel comfortable investing in, but I'm probably very reluctant to do so right now.
Hey, but that's okay. But you're going and supporting the mission and helping to educate other people in the room. And that's something that's super important because when I first started going to these things, I couldn't put a dime towards any of these trips. But, over the years, things have changed and that's been very helpful. And I've made the connections over the years so I could be able to know who to go with and what exactly would be the best places to go.
In your hunting journey so far, we'll go back a little bit to why you love hunting. Has there been, let's say, a species that you've always wanted to pursue if you haven't already notched that yet? But is there something you're still looking forward to pursuing in some country or some continent that you haven't done before? Is there kind of a dream hunt you have in mind?
Yes. So I have two. One of them is booked and I'm getting ready to do it in 2026. So I'm doing a lion safari in Zimbabwe and I'm going for a male lion. And then I've also in the process of petitioning for a permit to also hunt a lioness as well. So that's very exciting because I'd love to have the pair together. It's such a special project. So that's one of them. And then my other dream hunt, which is several years down the road, but it's good to have a reach goal, is to hunt a markhor.
And explain what that is for those unfamiliar.
Yeah. A markhor is an animal that lives in the Middle East. It has a unique set of horns that spiral up, and it is a mountain animal, and it is a very difficult hunt. It's high altitude, extremely unstable ground. You're hanging off the side of a mountain at some point, and it's just such a rewarding hunt and a gorgeous, gorgeous animal.
Is it the Marco Polo sheep, if I'm not mistaken, or is it a different one?
Different. Marco Polo is a dream as well, but the markhor is a little more prized in my eyes.
Interesting. I'll have to see what a markhor is. I don't think I've heard of that one before, but that's super fascinating. Let's round it out with how do we get women involved in hunting and also the conservation side? Because you seem obviously very steeped and involved in the Pittsburgh chapter of SCI. There are countless chapters of SCI, plenty of different species groups out there for ducks, deer, elk. But I feel like SCI kind of encompasses all of the species, big and small. But if a woman is listening, they may not necessarily perhaps want to do big game hunting. Maybe they want to do small game hunting, start with, and maybe work their way towards big game hunting or vice versa. What would you recommend to them for getting involved, developing this passion, and becoming a conservationist? I think it's important for women who may not be steeped in the industry so much or may not be doing this directly like I am and previous guests have done. You obviously balance a real job and then do all this stuff to complement your day job. I bet other women are listening. What do you offer to them as someone who works, long hours and juggles conservation hunting on the side?
Absolutely. I think my first piece of advice is to contact a local organization such as a safari club, Adult Waterfowl, Ducks Unlimited, et cetera, and see how you can get involved. Because typically a lot of these organizations are starting to have either women's committees or women's subgroups of the chapter. So that way it's kind of a like-minded, soft area to be introduced. That's definitely a place I would start. And if a local organization doesn't have that, then don't give up. Definitely reach out to local hunt clubs because typically they're starting ladies groups now. And I mean, I totally agree with you. Some people just start small and with bird hunting and they really develop a love for it. Then they go hunt all sorts of crazy things all over the world. Or they say, hey, I just want to stick to, the United States to hunt. I was just talking to a lady the other week. She's like, I never want to leave the U.S. to hunt. I'm like, no problem. There is plenty to do in North America. That is for sure. So it's just kind of starting small, reaching out to an organization that can help and provide the support. Because if you kind of go out on your own and try and figure out what to do, it's not helpful. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people that get swindled sometimes by unsavory people because in anything in the world, there's going to always be unsavory people. And I've heard horror stories about how women or just even men starting in hunting and they book a trip overseas and they get there and the outfitter's not there. They just literally stole their money and never picked them up from the airport. So definitely reach out to a reliable, reputable organization, and that's the best way to get started.
That is some good advice, because you could spend a lot of money. You could endanger yourself if you don't know how to do things, from what friends have told me who've embarked on these international hunting trips. So that's a really solid piece of advice. Ashley, if my listeners want to learn more about getting involved in SCI, follow your hunting journey, where would you like to direct them to?
Yeah, reach out to me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Grandtitas, Grandtitas. I have all my hunting on there. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to direct you to wherever I can. I've hunted on almost every continent now, and I know a lot of people in Safari Club, and I could definitely, if I don't know the answer, get you to someone who will know the answer.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashley, for joining the program. I hope we can revisit sometime soon. And if you ever come down to the DC area, we'd love to get together. Maybe we could plan some hunts in North America or in the Eastern United States together in the future, if you have a willingness. Maybe involve Sarah, too, if she hasn't already done this. So I really appreciate you coming on the Sportswoman Show.
Absolutely. You guys can come up to my house anytime. We'll go pheasant hunting. No problem.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Sportswoman Show. Your support is so crucial. Take a moment right now if you can and help us out by hitting the subscribe button on your podcatcher of choice, leaving a review, sharing with your friends, and engaging with us on social media. We also need guest ideas. If you have a suggestion on a strong outdoor woman we need to talk to, shoot our producer an email at cody@troutstreamstudios.com.